and the electrician was called Y2K. A lot of people thought Y2K was a failure. No, it wasn't. Get ready to listen to what it really meant. We learned afterwards what it really meant, not before, unfortunately. Y2K was designed by a woman in 1957 called Grace Hopper. Write down 1957 if you're taking notes, please. Grace Hopper and a team of scientists built a card called the Hollerith card, Hollerith card, which had 80 spaces. In order to save space on the card, because they only had 80 places to put their information, they chopped out all the 19s, you see. 1957 became 57. In the year 1967, 10 years later, the Bureau of Standards, an official American government department, ratified that fact that from now on all computer firms had to use just 2 digits for the date, which was 67 instead of 1967. Everything went well until about the year 1999, but however, anybody who drives a motor car should know that when your speedo gets to 99, you know what comes next, unless you need help. Most people would know it goes to 000, you see. And all these computer people knew exactly what was going to happen, but the mainframes weren't quite sure when it got to 1900, because you chopped out the 19, the mainframes built in the old days weren't sure whether it was 1900 or 2000. And magazines like The Time and the Newsweek wrote articles called The Day the World Shut Down and all this sort of stuff. And through fear, look at this everybody, that's the key word, through fear, all the nations on earth upgraded their computers and synchronized them. And the American government chose a guy called John Koskinen with 25 task forces at a cost of $640 billion. How much did it cost altogether? $640 billion. And at a cost of $640 billion, even countries like Africa, South America, that couldn't afford to do so, upgraded, if you're taking notes, and write down the word synchronized. They upgraded and synchronized their computers, and they say we have now entered an electronic new world order. Now listen to what this man says. Koskinen says, as reported in the newspaper USA Today, I can now run the world with 4 people. Let's say it together. I can now run the world with 4 people. The stage is now set. Just the roof on the house to go. And at this moment, you remember last time I was here, 4 years ago I think, I told you, I had a cutting which says the collapse of Japan will bring the new world order. And you will know that Japan has collapsed already. They're right on the edge now. They're almost bankrupt. Their banks are collapsing all over the place, and that's why there are not so many Japanese tourists these days. Did you know America has cut the interest rates 11.5 times already? And the other day, Alan Greenspan of the Federal Reserve says we cannot afford to cut the interest rates anymore. We don't know what to do. America is in a very bad way. Argentina is collapsing. There will be a domino effect worldwide very soon. Big businesses are going down. And even, who is the man today? What's his name? Murdoch. Murdoch's had the biggest collapse of history. It's on today. And he's one of yours. He's an Aussie. He's gone to live overseas. I'm telling you, everybody, the whole money system is going shortly. Now watch this. Years ago I came to this country. I've been coming here for 30 years now, since 1972. Look at this. Someone gave me this one years ago, an empty wallet upside down laughing. You remember this one? And the words all together, welcome to the cashless society. All together, welcome to the cashless society. Some of you say tonight, I'm cashless already. I heard of a pastor who was running a church. He said, you know, dear friends, most people in my congregation will know I've spent my time trying to reach the poor of this parish. Judging by tonight's offering, I have succeeded. They want to bring in a cashless society. That'll be the roof on the house, and then in comes the mark of the beast. Okay? Everybody still alive? Yes. Gets exciting now. You want some excitement? Here we go. Right, on with this. Now let's read what David Rockefeller says. We are on the verge, come on, of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order. That's David Rockefeller. He is dedicated to world government. Next one, please. Let's read this one, taken from the globalization of world politics. Our world system cannot continue to reproduce itself. A crisis within a particular world system heralds its end and replacement by another system. Now, the crisis that was chosen was the bringing down of the Twin Towers. Because everywhere you go in the world, they say the world will never be the same again. It was very cleverly designed. They worked in collaboration with the guys who flew the planes and the world government people who put charges in the building and demolished it. And if you saw those buildings, they were imploded. People heard explosions, and if you look at the pictures of them, they came down like that, just like that. They didn't fall sideways or like that. And if you read the information on how those towers were built, you will see it was impossible to happen what happened there. Now, that's interesting. So I'm telling you, I've got the information on this. And that was the crisis that brought about the change that was needed to bring about a world government. How many people died? 3,000. It was a blood sacrifice to Lucifer. A blood sacrifice to Lucifer. You're dealing with a satanic plan here, and those people were sacrificed in order to bring in a crisis that would bring about a system where you were under observation at all times. Now, did you know in New Zealand now, I don't want to frighten anybody, but you go to New Zealand, they never had any security at the airports, nothing. You go through there now, they will examine all your bags going in and out, even flying within the country. You now go through x-rays. They never had that before September the 11th. And therefore you see the crisis very cleverly done. You say, have they ever done that before? Yes, Hitler did it years ago. Hitler bombed one of his own buildings and blamed the Jews for it. The American government did the same thing at Oklahoma. You remember the Oklahoma bombing of the Murrah Center? They said Timothy McVeigh did it. His bomb hardly did any damage at all. It just damaged the outside of the building. But there were charges laid on the third floor that right against the main beams in that building that brought the whole thing down. And a man called Major General Parton of the US Air Force was going to go and inspect the area. He said that Timothy McVeigh's bomb hardly did any damage at all. I will prove that. He said, please hold it up until I get there. And they demolished the building before he arrived. There were people on the alcohol, tobacco, firearm, ATF, is it? On the top building, the 9th floor, they were all out that day. They knew exactly what they were doing. And the thing was brought down by people setting up world government so they could blame the patriots, of whom Timothy McVeigh was one of the members of the Patriot movement. Get the idea? Now they've done it again to the Trade Center, and people need to understand. You remember the face of Satan in the smoke? Some of you saw that. That was real. That was really there. They can't explain that. The face of Satan was in the smoke. It was a satanic thing. That's the crisis that will bring about the world government, you see. We're now ready to receive chips. We'll receive anything as a form of protecting ourselves. Get the idea? Young people piercing themselves, they'll go for it in a big way. I want you to, the ultimate implant, of course, will be the mark of the beast. And that's why Satanists have a little implant in them, so they can be traced by the Satanist movement anywhere in the world. But once we receive Jesus, the implant will come out. But the ultimate is going to come. It's spoken of in the book of Revelation, and it's spoken of in chapter 13. Okay, let's put this one on, please. Let's read it. On March the 20th, 2001, Japan's on the verge of monetary collapse. September the 11th, the attack on America. September 2001, Greenspan cuts the interest rates for the 9th time. Now he's done it 11.5 times. Now look at this one. Japan has $500 billion invested in US banks. If they withdraw their currency, an overnight collapse could occur. And I want you to understand the amount is $500 billion. And that means their investments in the Gold Coast. Gold Coast. They take it out, that'll bring down Australia. And if they take it out of England, anywhere in the world, America, they can collapse America overnight. We're right on the edge at this very moment of speaking. This is serious stuff. That will, it's called that, is a secret society whose members are sworn to silence. Above all, the order is powerful, unbelievably powerful. The order meets annually, patriarchs only, on Deer Island in the St. Lawrence River. When a new member is initiated into the order, they say tonight he will die to the world and be born again into the order, as he will have a new name and 14 new blood brothers also with new names. And if you see the film called The Skulls, you'll see on the wall of the order, the lodge, called the order, or the Skull and Bones, it's got the word war. W-A-R, and that's why George Bush is always having wars. He's got to send his people off to Afghanistan, and then he speaks about the axis of evil. He's talking about Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. You see, he's always got to be ready to send the troops somewhere else. This is the policy of the lodge. Also, on the wall of the lodge is a swastika, a German swastika, for it is a German secret society. Very evil indeed. Dedicated to world government, and the President of America still belongs to that society, because you can never get out unless you're killed or unless you die. Next one, please. Watch this one. The order has either set up or penetrated just about every significant research, policy and opinion-making organisation in the United States, in addition to the church, business, government and politics. The evolution of America reflecting individual opinion, ideas and decisions at the grassroots is simply not true. On the contrary, says Anthony Sutton, the writer of this book, the broad direction has been created artificially and stimulated by the order. He's a brilliant writer, this guy. Next, please. Well, I think we've done that one. It's all right, though. Here it is. Now watch this one. The order follows the philosophies of George Hegel, a German philosopher. All historical events emerge from a conflict between opposing forces. Excuse me, everybody. You must have a conflict before we get the New World Order. That's why everywhere there's a change, they have a conflict. E.g., South Africa. Now, he divides the world, this philosopher called Hegel, he says part of the world is thesis, the other half is antithesis, and when you bring them together, that is called synthesis. Let's look at South Africa, shall we? Thesis, Nelson Mandela, ANC. Antithesis, Buthelezi, the Zulus. There is no chance of peace between the two groups. Henry Kissinger goes over there. The next thing, he brings them together, and they have the Rainbow Nation, the new South Africa. It happens. That is called synthesis. Illustration, you go to Ireland. You've got the Union in the north with Ian Paisley. You have Gerry Adams and the IRA. There's no chance of peace there. Henry Kissinger goes over there with a group, and before you can say Jack Robinson, there is some sort of peace in Ireland. What else? America and Russia. America, thesis, Russia, antithesis. At a certain time in history, they come together and they now have a headquarters running space program together. It used to be they hate each other. They said the axis of evil. They said the evil nation, satanic and so on. Next thing you see Ronald Reagan next to Gorbachev. And now it's Ronnie and Gorby. They've got their arms around each other and they're having a photo taken. That's called synthesis. There's only one more big one they want to do. That's Israel, thesis, Arabs, antithesis, and at the right time, using the Hegelian dialectical philosophy, they will bring those two groups together in a 7-year treaty, fulfill the Bible prophecy, and Jesus will come again. Whoa! Okay, now they say, well, if that's the case, the question is asked by Hegel, if it is true that they organise all the governments around the world, even your government in Canberra is run by the order. If that's the case, what is the use of having so many people in Parliament? And here's the answer here. This is what Hegel says. The function of a government or Congress is to give the impression that peasants have some value. So when they pass a law, it makes them feel good. And they allow them to feel like that, but they control the ultimate destiny of every country on earth. All right? Now, someone said to me in America, can you prove George Bush belongs to that group? Yes. You say, how can you prove it? It's in our newspaper in New Zealand. Have a look at this. This is taken from the New Zealand Herald on the 26th of April 2001. Skullduggery uncovers Bush's bony secrets. The bizarre rituals of one of America's most exclusive clubs, which counts President Bush and his father among its members, has been laid bare by a hidden camera. Someone put a camera up on the roof of the Skull and Bones Club. The all-male Skull and Bones Club at Yale University has long been held up as an example of the powerful cabals that run America from behind the scenes. Soon after he entered the White House, George W. Bush held a private dinner for his year of bonesmen, as they are called. It is the initiation ceremony of this year's members caught by fellow Yale students on a night vision camera that has set things astir. Over here, please. During the initiation, new members undergo a mock throat-cutting ceremony. They then take turns to lie in a coffin and recount their personal and sexual histories to forge a bond of secrecy within the club. Having died as barbarians, they step from the coffin, reborn as members of the order. Members remain in the club for life, and that's why poor George is called temporary. He's in a very sticky position at the moment. No wonder he looks a bit nervous when he comes on television. Okay. We now move quickly on. Now, the building of the world government, thank you, is likened to the building of a house. I think you'll enjoy this bit. When you build a house, do we have any builders here tonight, please? Don't Don't be shy, brother. It's all right. Yeah, God bless you. We're not against you. Anybody who builds a house will know you start with the foundation. Who agrees with that? You don't even have to be a builder to know that. Where's the foundation? We've lost it. Here it is. Now, the foundation of the World Government House was the Illuminati, 1776. We all know that now. We've done that. The next thing you do is you build a framework, and they chose New Zealand as the framework. I'll explain how it happened. Now, I know that in many cases, people over here think New Zealand's a very small country. Geographically, it's the same size as Great Britain. The only difference is it has less people. And it's very quiet. When I go to England, I'll be there next month, God willing. I've got a month in England again. And when I go twice this year, we go twice this year to England, when you go to Heathrow Airport, you can hardly get there. There's so many cars. And when you get back to New Zealand, you might get off the plane at Christchurch, drive home 200 miles, and I might pass 2 motor cars. And if I do, I say to my wife, my word is busy tonight. How many people have we got? 3.5 million. How many have they got in England? 160 million, isn't it? A country the same size as New Zealand. And they chose it for a test case, and this is how it happened. Let me draw it for you. Here it is. There's New Zealand. North Island, South Island, Stewart Island. Here's your country here. Always put Tasmania in, they get excited. Over here, put in the date line, you see. Now, why did they choose New Zealand as a test case for the world government? The reason is that we are close to the date line and we start the computers every day. So when the sun hits Mount Hikurangi, the computers roll in New Zealand, then they roll our Eastern Standard Time, Central Standard Time, Western Standard Time, over there and around the world. My wife comes from an island called Samoa. I will draw a map of that for you. There. Now, watch this. Watch this, everybody. If you have Christmas dinner here, you have Christmas dinner there the next day. So you have 2 Christmas dinners. It's all right. It's a bit difficult if you're a Seventh-day Adventist. You're not sure what to do. You're not sure whether that's the right one or that one. In fact, it is so confusing. Listen, everybody, I'm not being rude. It's so confusing to the Seventh-day people that when you go to Tonga, they have their 7th day on Sunday. And I went there. We've been to Tonga a few times. I went down to their church. I said, why are you worshipping on Sunday? You're Seventh-day Adventist. They said, somebody fiddled with the international date line. Honestly. Interesting. Anyway, the point is this. That because we are next to the date line here, we start the money system. We are important to the world government people. Secondly, we are a small nation that are very easy to manipulate. The motto of New Zealand is, she'll be right. And the Australian motto, she'll be right, mate. That's why they do anything to us at all. We are very relaxed sort of people. There's not much excitement. In 1990, enunciated that purpose. It was to set up a new world order. His son, George W. Bush, has to finish the job that his father started 10 years ago. Now, when I was in America, I don't often say this, but I might as well say it here tonight. My driver, who has carried all the prophetic preachers across America before me, told me, he said, every time we get to a bridge, you watch. And we went through 38 states in 2.5 weeks, and every bridge we went near, there were men working underneath it, putting in steel girders. He said, that is for the United Nations tanks that are going to come in and take over America shortly. Is everybody clear what I'm saying tonight? This goes on tape. The whole of America will be inundated with United Nations troops. In fact, they're training now in Alamogordo, New Mexico. My son and I were over there some time ago. We were building a church up in the Rocky Mountains, and I dug out the foundations. I put that in. My son's a carpenter. I said, I'm going back to New Zealand now, son. I've had enough. You carry on, build your church. So I went home. I left him to it. He rang me when I got home. He said, Dad, the same day you left, he said, I went down to the restaurant run by a Mexican fella called Julio. He said, there I was, excuse me, he said, there I was sitting ready for my meal, and the waiter came up to me and he said, do you know that there are 250,000 United Nations troops from Germany and Russia training in Alamogordo, New Mexico, at the Air Force base there? He said, my dad told me that. He said, it's true. And very shortly what they're going to do, George Bush is going to send the American troops out of the country to all these trouble spots called the axis of evil. And while he's got his own troops out of the country, the United Nations will take over America and imprison Christians and imprison patriots, because they're going to introduce their one world government. Anybody who is against it will be in prison. So I guess I'd be a candidate, wouldn't I? Okay, let's move quickly on. And that's on tape, what I'm saying tonight. The biggest base they've got ready for the prisons is in Alaska. The Alaskan prison camp is over 1 million square acres up there. And many of the military bases in America are closing down, and they're turning them into prison camps. And I've got the video at home showing these prison camps and the facilities they've got already there for imprisoning Christians. But praise God, we're serving a winner. Hallelujah, everybody. It's got to come down to a confrontation, you see. There must be a confrontation, the peculiar, particular purpose for which America was set up. In D.C., these are streets. Have a look at them. Some of you heard of the New Zealand footballer Michael Jones. He's part of our family, that boy, and he's a street designer. I said to him one day, Michael, I said, you tell me, what do you see there? He said, I see the grid system. That's very clear. But in the middle of the grid system, you've got these strange ones coming like that. Look, that's a compass, and that's a square. Now, did you know that in Freemasonry it has lots of sexual overtones? And they say that that represents the male organ. That is the compass, and the square represents the female organ. It is the uniting of the physical and the esoterical, the spiritual from the heavens, you see. And down here we have what is called the 5-pointed star. Can you turn it on its side, please, sister? That's it. The 1 point down. Notice that? A little further. Notice the 1 point down. What they do in witchcraft is they put the goat's head in that. It's called the pentagram. So the goat's head goes there. We'll have a look at it. Here it is here. There it is. The goat of Mendes is the name of the goat. The name of the devil inside the goat is Baphomet. That's a demon. He's got 2 horns up there, 2 ears out here, the beard of the goat. Now if you go back to the other one again, the map, you'll see that the White House has got 2 points there of witchcraft. The end of the compass and the beard of the goat stops right at the White House. President W. Bush, George W., is actually influenced by witchcraft from 2 different directions. That's why he's in a very, very serious job, believe me. Now we move on. He also belongs to a secret society, as did his father before him, called the Skulls. That's the front of a book written by Anthony Sutton. It's a German secret society. And George Bush belongs to this, comes out of Yale University. His father belonged to it, and his grandfather before him. Recognize this. If you belong to that society, you have to have a secret name, because the Skull and Bones is the modern version of the Illuminati. Everybody hear me? The Skull and Bones is the modern version of the Illuminati. So George Bush Senior in 1990, who said New World Order, he introduced it. Do you know what his secret name was? Anybody know? Poppy. Write it down, please. Poppy. I was having a meeting in Upper Hutt the other day. Some of you Kiwis know where that is. Lower Hutt. Having meetings there. And a man stood up in my meeting. He said, I went to school with George Bush. He said, we used to call him Poppy. And while I was in the States, I went through those 13 major cities, and I made inquiries. I said, what is the name of his son? What's his secret name? I found it. George W. His secret name is Temporary. I said, if I had a name like that, I'd be very nervous. Now, why do you think he's called Temporary? I'll tell you. George W. Bush, here's his history. A man who doesn't know very much about world events at all. He was a drunkard. He used to drink Jim Beam whiskey. He wandered around in Chinese slippers and cast-off clothing. One day his wife Laura said to him, I'm sick of this, George. I don't like living like this. Will you give up the whiskey or will you give me up? He said, I'll give up the whiskey. So they called Billy Graham around. Billy Graham prayed the sinner's prayer with him, and George W. Bush has prayed that prayer. He has been born again into the family of God. That's good news. Whenever he flies over America, he prays for the country. He reads his Bible every morning. He does Bible studies. But the problem is, he has also been born into a satanic group, and his name is Temporary. You can see why, can't you? Because they tell him what to do. And when he makes a speech, if he goes off his speech, he doesn't know what to say, honestly. You watch him. He's got to keep reading his speeches because they tell him and his speechwriter what to say. And I said the other day, I said to my wife, come and watch this. He's going off his speech. It was awful. I'm not being rude to him. He's just not, he doesn't know about world events. He doesn't know anything about overseas leaders. He'd only been out of the country once. He'd been to northern Mexico, that's all. And now he's got the job as the world's leader. He's got to listen to his speechwriters. So what happens is this. Because the man belongs to two different groups. So in the year 1961, some of you will know that the International Monetary Fund came to New Zealand in 1961 and they said to our Prime Minister, would you like some money? Can we lend you some money? Now, we didn't need to borrow the money. We were doing so well. Farmers in Aussie and New Zealand in 1961 were doing very well indeed. They were carrying hay bales in the back of their cars. Everything was great, you know. And then in 1961, our Prime Ministers of the day borrowed money from the IMF. They should never have done it. The Prime Minister of New Zealand was called Sir Keith Holyoake. The Prime Minister here was called Menzies. I asked that last time I was here. In 1961, the IMF came to New Zealand and they came to Australia and we borrowed money. Now, notice this please, loans. Now the moment we borrowed the money, we wrecked the economy of the country. That's when we started to get unemployment. Everything got out of balance. Your man Menzies borrowed the money also. And what we didn't realise was they signed conditions. They don't use the word conditions. That's too small. They have to use another word, conditionalities, policies, you see. The longer the words, the more difficult it is to understand. Why don't they just say conditions? Oh, I can't use that. It's too simple. Conditionalities, policies, see. So the average Aussie or Kiwi looks at that. What the dickens does that mean? No one knows. So what happens is we get the money and we keep paying interest on this. And the farmers are having a ball. They're buying 2 tractors instead of 1. They're buying extra farms over here and over here. Everything's going well. And then in the year 1987, 26 years later, they come back again and the Prime Minister Holyoake is dead. Menzies is dead. We've got new Prime Ministers and they say you will now fulfil the conditions. 26 years later. And I'm going to call out these words. If you recognise them, please call it, say something, would you? So I know you're still awake. The first word we saw coming up in the paper, it's a new word, restructuring. And all our folks said, what on earth does that mean? And all our clever friends said it means they're going to change things around and make things more efficient. And when you go overseas, they don't use exactly the same word. You go to South Africa, they call it structural readjustment. But what it really means is they sack thousands of government workers. Why? Because they're going to sell the assets and there's no longer will be any work for those people, so you sack them. And you give them money in a brown paper envelope, they walk down the road, their job is gone forever. They might pay a redundancy fee of $30,000 even to get rid of the guy because he's never coming back and that job will never be replicated again. So off he goes. Used to be called getting the sack, now it's called being made redundant. When you go to South Africa, a guy walking down the road with his brown paper envelope, what's happened to you? He says, I've just been structurally readjusted. You go through the border into Zimbabwe, over there they call it ESAP, Economic Structural Adjustment Program. You go through the border into Zambia up to the north, they call it SAP, Structural Adjustment Program. Every country is slightly different and they all have little catchwords they use. Do you remember the catchwords they used here? There is some belt tightening to be done. Here's another one. There is some pain to be endured. They talked about a level playing field and light at the end of the tunnel. We saw in the paper a few days later was corporatisation. The word is so big it's not even in the dictionary. It's so new too. So we said to all our clever university friends, what does that mean? They said, well, because governments are not very good at organising things, they're not efficient, we're going to turn government departments into corporations and they'll run things better. And all the Kiwis said, oh, good. We woke up a few mornings later, the new word is privatisation. We said, what does that mean? Never seen it before. This is 1987. It's a new word, you see. Never seen it. And they said, oh, it's going to make things more efficient because these corporations are going to be taken out of government hands and put into private hands. They're better at business. And all the Kiwis said, oh, good. A few mornings later, we wake up, the new word in the paper is shares. We smell a rat. Sniff, sniff. We say, you're not selling these shares overseas, are you? Oh no, says the government. We're only selling 49% overseas and we're keeping 51% in the country. And all the Kiwis said, oh good. Because you see, look, 49% overseas and then 51% in the country. Now, we went to preach in a place called Sri Lanka. You've heard of that? Which used to be called Ceylon. And while I was speaking there, there was a massive meeting, we had big meetings there in Colombo. I said, what is your catchword here? And I laughed when they said it. It's so funny. You wouldn't guess their catchword. Their catchword is peopleization. You're allowed to laugh, folks, if you want to, Peopleization, I said. That's a goodie. And I said, what does that mean, for goodness sake? They said that when they sell the government departments, they sell 49% overseas, they keep 51% in the country. Those are called the peopleization shares. What happens next? One of these guys gets on the telephone, he calls someone in New York in a position of power and says, let's have a little stock market collapse, shall we? So they rocked the stock market for 24 hours. Do you remember it went down some time ago? And when it went down, one of these groups gets a fright. Who gets a fright? The overseas well-known investors or the little peopleization people? These little people get a fright. They sell their shares to these guys, and at that point, what used to be yours is gone forever. Paid for by your father's tax money, your grandfather's tax money, your tax money. You've lost the asset forever. It's called state-owned enterprises, SOEs, or the family silver goes overseas. So when you see the word privatisation in future, add another word to it, and the word is goodbye. And another word, forever. You will never see it again. It's gone. Now at that stage, the government has got a whole handful of money. Where do they get their money from? The guys that bought the assets. So what do they do with the money? They pay back the IMF from their loans from 1961. Where does that leave Australia? It leaves them with no money and no assets. So what do you do next? You call in investors. And if your investors don't come, your country goes down the tube. And so you call investors. Where do they come from? Now, if you're taking notes, write this down, please. The world has been divided into three groups, three areas. Number one, listen carefully to what I'm saying now. I'm speaking to you on the 15th of May in the year 2002. The world has been divided officially into three groups, ready for the final world government when they bring it all together. And here it is. Number one group, Europe, with their own standing army and their own currency, the euro dollar, affecting the lives of 300 million people at this stage. I was in Cairo last year. As I drove through Cairo, I saw these big black limousines. I said, what's happening here? They said, Egypt is going to adopt the euro also. Many countries in Africa will adopt the euro because every country in the world must be connected to one of these three groups. Group number two is the Americas, from the tip of Alaska in the north to the tip of South America in the south, and they will all be adopting the American dollar, getting rid of their own national currencies. The first country to give up their money was Guatemala. They are now using the American dollar, and Argentina, which is bankrupt, is now going the same way. They will be using the American dollar shortly. In fact, right through there, they'll get rid of all their currencies, and they'll have their own standing army and the American dollar. Region number three, to which we belong, everybody listen, we are called APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and we now belong to Asia. Asia, Australia, and New Zealand are one region, and we will have our own standing army and our own currency shortly. I doubt very much whether it'll be a dollar. It'll probably be a won or a yen, an Asian currency, because we are small fish in a very big pond. And that is why you see many Asian folk coming here, because this is the region they belong to now. Get the idea, please? So that being the case, was MMP. We brought in a coalition government. Do you have a coalition here? A coalition government means weak government. And in New Zealand we have all sorts of strange things happening. We've got one who's what is he? He's a man pretending to be a woman. Georgina is its name. We've got another guy with dreadlocks, because he's been on a farm, he's got all the stuff in his hair. He comes to Parliament on a skateboard. We've got another guy who used his money to buy a new set of underpants, about $85 I think they were. It's just incredible. It's just stupid. Politics has gone nuts. Wherever you have a coalition, you've got a weak government. E.g. Israel, coalition, weak government. E.g. Italy, coalition, weak government. E.g. Australia, coalition, weak government. E.g. New Zealand, coalition, weak government. And that's exactly what they want, a weak government. We can now be controlled from overseas by the guys who have bought the assets, you see. Because once you've sold your assets, you've lost your power. So there we are. Okay, so New Zealand, we'll put on our map again, love, please. Now, when you put up your framework, that's been done in New Zealand 1987, and every country is following the New Zealand plan.